defamation. I told you the Islamic definition of slander, remember? It's not telling something false, it's telling something true that they don't want known. So is that defamation if I tell a truth, if I say Islam has this imperialist imperative to subjugate and dominate non-Muslim societies and individuals? This is a statement abundantly establishable from the Islamic texts and teachings, the teachings of Muhammad, the teachings of the Quran, and 1 million imams all around the world. So is that defamation? Yes, by the OIC's lights, that would be defamation of religions. What I just did, just there. You saw it happen. You can bring me up on charges. If the OIC had its way, it would be illegal. It would be criminal in the United States to do that kind of thing. Now, of course, then you say, well, we have the First Amendment. It also says that thing about freedom of speech. And that's great. Well, I'll tell you something else. The OIC has been trying every year to compel the United Nations, particularly the Western states, that is, Western Europe and the United States, to criminalize religious defamation. The Bush administration, and this is not a political statement, the Bush administration had plenty of a great deal of cluelessness, an abundance of cluelessness about the jihad issue. And so does the Obama administration. So this is bipartisan cluelessness. But in any case, the fact is that the Bush administration resisted these initiatives at the UN every year. Last year, the Obama administration actually joined and endorsed an initiative to criminalize, to call upon member states of the UN to criminalize religious defamation. Religious defamation also, if you read the OIC's fine print, it includes any discussion of terrorism in connection to Islam. And I am constantly accused of linking Islam to terrorism, as if I'm the guy shouting Allahu Akbar and waving a Quran around before I blow myself up. Obviously, it is Islamic jihadis who keep linking Islam to terrorism. Nidal Malik Hassan, the Fort Hood shooter, he was handing out Qurans the morning that he shot 13 Americans at Fort Hood. And he was shouting Allahu Akbar, and he gave at what he was supposed to be giving a lecture on psychiatry, he explained about the doctrines of jihad and warned that the kind of thing he was about to do could happen. He gave abundant indications of what he was all about. But the Obama administration, utterly in line with the OIC agenda, in its study of the Fort Hood massacre, never mentions Islam or jihad even once, says that it was workplace violence. Now this is entirely in line with the OIC's agenda. The Obama administration endorsed the initiative, and Secretary of State Clinton met for 3 days in a secret meeting. Not a thing was released about the meeting, with Ekmeladini Sanolu, the Secretary General of the OIC, a few months ago. And the discussion was about how to bring defamation of religion laws into countries that have protections of freedom of speech. Now this is very ominous, but even more ominous is this. A few years back, Theo van Gogh, the grandnephew of the painter, he was a filmmaker in the Netherlands, and he made a film about the oppression of women in Islam. And it was sort of a racy film. He took a naked woman and had written on her skin the Quran passages that mandate the oppression of women, like good women are obedient, as for those that are not, beat them, which is chapter 4, verse 34. Wife beating is universal in all cultures, but only in Islam is it given divine sanction. But of course it's right-wing to say that. In any case, Theo van Gogh was murdered on the street in Amsterdam by a Muslim who objected to his film. He objected to the writing of Quran verses on this lady's skin. He thought that that was an affront to the Quran. The oppression of women in Islam, that did not register for him. And he murdered Theo van Gogh. So this was a warning to everyone. As a matter of fact, he stabbed into Van Gogh's body a list of the other people that he wanted killed. And they were mostly Dutch political figures who had spoken out against jihad and Islamic supremacism, like the courageous Somali ex-Muslim Ayaan Hirsi Ali, the politician Geert Wilders, and others. But in any case, and they all still live, we can happily say, but the message was clear that a new Europe had dawned at that moment, and that the freedom of speech was now severely imperiled by violent and bloody fanatical thugs who would commit murder to prevent being said what they did not want said. Now, in America, that has not happened so far. I fully expect, I have to tell you, that eventually it will. That somebody who speaks out and offends Islam in this way by telling unpleasant and unwelcome truths about it will be murdered. I hope it never happens, but I don't see anything preventing it. In any case, whether it happens or not, there's something else that's happening in the meantime. As Pamela Geller says, it's not, in America they don't assassinate you, they just assassinate your character. And this brings us back to the topic of our discussion tonight. That is, that it is now stigmatized as a right-wing issue, and is hateful, and is bigoted, and is racist to stand up for universal human rights, the freedom of speech, the freedom of conscience, the equality of dignity of women with men, the equality of rights of non-Muslims with Muslims. How hateful to stand for those things. But this is, you see, a concerted effort on the part of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Muslim Brotherhood. You've heard all about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, but the Muslim Brotherhood is an international organization. And it is dedicated in its own words, according to a captured internal document, to eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house so that it falls and Allah's religion is victorious over other religions. Now remember what I said at the beginning. When it says, when you have Muslim documents and spokesmen that say things like Allah's religion is victorious over other religions, they're not talking about a bunch of people spontaneously deciding to convert to Islam and hooray. They mean the imposition of Islamic law over the society as a political system and the subjugation and deprivation of basic rights of the non-Muslims accordingly. Now, what better way to sabotage our miserable house than to discredit, smear, demonize, and marginalize everybody who's trying to keep it from happening? And then you can see your way clear. Then it's no problem. And you can look, Brian said, and I Googled him, and a shiver went up my spine because I know what you see when you Google me. And I ask you, go back and go ahead and do it. But compare what you see there with what you heard here. Mm-hmm. And consider whether you're being told the truth. Mm-hmm. Consider whether I'm telling you the truth, or maybe it's really that I secretly want to bring fascist dictatorship to the U.S. I mean, it's a real well-kept secret, actually, because I wouldn't even know how to do that if I wanted to. But the fact is that everything that I have ever said publicly is about preserving exactly the same values that I am talking to you about tonight. Now, here again, this is not about me. Every freedom fighter in the United States today, everyone who sticks his or her neck out to say that we are going to resist this is given the same treatment and is made out to be some kind of a kook or a clown or an extremist or a marginal figure with kooky ideas that nobody who's serious really needs to listen to. Now I ask you, I've quoted to you tonight Sheikh Qaradawi, who is the most famous, powerful, and influential sheikh in the entire Islamic world, which is saying a lot. You're talking about over 1 billion people. And he says Islam is going to conquer Europe and America. I quoted you the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an international organization found in virtually every country in the world. And every major Muslim group in the United States today is tied in one way or another to the Muslim Brotherhood. And it says that they're going to they're working on eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house. I quoted you Maulana Maududi, who was the founder of the largest Islamist political party in Pakistan. And he says non-Muslims have absolutely no right to wield the reins of power in any part of God's earth. I could quote you 20 other authorities just like them, but those three are fairly large mainstream type authorities, you see. They are not guys standing with a shopping bag on the street corner with the drool and yelling at him. And so, what we have before us is a propaganda campaign of proportions so immense and of a quality so sophisticated and skillful that most people would not have ever imagined that it could have been pulled off. And yet it has been, such that the defenders of freedom and human rights are portrayed as just the opposite, while those who wish to restrict those freedoms and human rights are portrayed as the innocent victims and as those that the human rights community ought to be looking to protect from racism and bigotry and hatred. Now, this is, here we are in 1984. I know it was a long time ago, but you remember the book, War is Peace, Freedom is Slavery, Ignorance is Strength. And we read about, all read the book, right? And we read about this propaganda campaign that inverted reality and turned everything around, and people didn't know what was up and what was down. And people probably, if you remember the book and you read the book, you probably thought, well, that's probably the way it was in Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union, but isn't it great that we don't live in that kind of a situation here? Well, we don't live in a totalitarian state, to be sure. But the same kind of inversion of reality is being perpetrated upon us today. And all you have to do, if you don't believe me, is go to the Middle East Media Research Institute, go to Jihad Watch, go to Atlas Shrugs, go anywhere where the statements of Islamic spokesmen are quoted, the statements of Islamic spokesmen in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and in Europe and in the United States, when they're talking to Muslim groups in Arabic and they don't think that anybody there is listening who's not in the group. And see, and you will see again and again and again, affirmations of the oppression of women, affirmations of the will to conquest, affirmations of contempt and hatred for non-Muslims. These things are not being fabricated, these things are not being made up, and these things are not being exaggerated. And so it is imperative tonight, an imperative incumbent upon all of us, to stand now. Whatever you may think of the people who have stood already, if you think, well, they are incurably right-wing and I'm not going to stand with them, okay, then do it yourself in your own wonderful left-wing way. But the reality is that this is a war, and it's not a war with guns. It's not a war that's going to be violent, necessarily. There may be violence perpetrated against the defenders of freedom, but they're doing so well without doing that in the United States that I don't really see that as becoming likely on a large scale. But the defenders of freedom, the people who actually do care to protect our human rights and our constitutional freedoms at this time in our history, have to act, not in a violent way, not in an unlawful way, but within every means that you have at your disposal, and with all your time and all your talents and all your abilities and all your treasure. We have to stand and realize nobody else is going to do it for us. The government is actually aiding the other side. The United States government under Barack Obama, here again, this is not a political thing. It really wasn't much better before. Barack Obama's Justice Department is joining in the lawsuits that I enumerated earlier, some of them demanding special rights and privileges for Muslims. For example, if any of you have ever been or are now school teachers, my condolences, but the reality is, imagine back when you were a first-year teacher, and I was a teacher too, so I can say that's okay. I was a first-year teacher. Remember when you were a first-year teacher, or remember when you were in school and there were these new teachers? There was a teacher, a Muslim teacher in a public school, and she went to the principal and said, I want 3 weeks off to make the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. 3 weeks off, first-year teacher. Can you imagine teachers already don't work for 3 months out of the year? And she wanted 3 weeks off in the middle of the school year. Not only that, but the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, it moves through the year because Islam has a lunar calendar that's 5 days shorter than ours. And so everything moves through the year. And so the Hajj falls at different points because it has to be done the first 10 days of the month of Dhul Hijjah. but the